What I mean is that each of you says, I belong to Paul, or I belong to Apollos, or I belong to Cephas, or I belong to Christ. Has Christ been divided? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. We want to belong. We all desire to belong. The people of Corinth belong to different groups. Some belong to Paul, others belong to Apollos, some belong to Cephas, and some belong to Christ, or they think Christ belongs to them is probably the more accurate translation. And this sense of belonging has created divisions in Corinth. That's why Paul says, has Christ been divided? So today I want to talk about three things. The first, what it means to belong. The second, the feeling of not belonging. And finally, the third, how do we cross those divisions? What it means to belong, what it feels like to not belong, and how we cross those divisions. First, what it means to belong. We all want to belong. We join book clubs, churches, civic organizations, country clubs, gyms, schools, because we want to belong. We have the desire to belong, and we enjoy the feeling of belonging. Let me give you an example. My high school had 2,000 students. 2,000 students. Thus, I had the desire and the need to belong. So I joined the high school wrestling team. Now, if you were on the high school wrestling team, you had a sense of belonging. We all had the same haircuts. We went to the barber, we asked for the 2-guard or the 3-guard, depending on how short your mother would let you cut it. We all got to the school at 7 a.m. There we'd go into the weight room, we'd put on that heavy metal, just slamming it out. Then we would run to our 8 o'clock class, decked out in our wrestling sweatshirts, our state champion t-shirts, our wrestling coats, just to let everybody know that we belonged together. Then at lunch, we'd go to the cafeteria. There in that large cafeteria, we had a big long table, the wrestling table. We all sat together, had that salad piled really high, fat-free or the reduced fat turkey breast on top of it, fat-free dressing. We looked like a group of Weight Watchers because we were a group of Weight Watchers. And then our afternoons, we spent all day in the wrestling room wrestling, and our weekends at wrestling meets across the state of Tennessee. We were a team. We had this great sense of belonging. Now, I imagine you have had a similar experience of belonging. Whether it is a group or an organization, belonging is a wonderful thing. Belonging is something to celebrate. And because we have this sense of belonging, we also have an idea of what it means to not belong. Think back to a time when you didn't belong. Maybe you were a minority in a group, or maybe you were of a different political opinion than others around you. Maybe you moved to a new city, or maybe you were starting a new job. Whatever the case, you felt like you didn't belong. The feeling of not belonging is an uncomfortable feeling. And if you are like me, you want to remove yourself from that feeling as quickly as possible. Let me offer a personal story of a time when I did not belong. About 10 years ago, it's actually 10 years ago this January, I was finishing up my final semester at Yale Divinity School. And I decided that I was going to get my money's worth. If you ever hear me say, let's get our money's worth, run. So I signed up for a class on the writing of German philosopher George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Well, the first class was an introduction to Hegel's philosophy, and I remember looking around that room, and there were about 10 of us sitting around that table, and I only recognized one divinity school student. That was the first clue that I did not belong. So I went to the second lecture, and there we were discussing Hegel's philosophy, or his lectures on the philosophy of religion. And I remember at a course into the lecture, about halfway into the lecture, everybody was talking, and it became clear that for one person in the classroom, yours truly, this was their first time to read Hegel. Everybody else had been around the block once or twice before. That was the second clue that I didn't belong. Oh, but I was in for a good time. So I decided to go back to the class a third time. And I remember sitting at that table and noticing that my book, which was purchased at the Divinity School bookstore, was a little different than everybody else's book. So I looked to my left, I looked over the student's shoulder to my right. I didn't understand a thing. They were reading in German. That's because the class was composed of doctoral students in philosophy and in theology. That was my third and final clue that I did not belong. So I waited till the class was over with. The rest of the students all went up to talk to the professor about things that I could not understand. I waited till they left, and I went up to the professor and said, I have made a mistake. I do not belong in this class with all these PhD students. I am studying to be a parish priest. I have an ordination date. I have a job lined up in South Georgia. I cannot fail this class. Too much is on the line. I said, I don't belong here with these students. I belong somewhere else. I belong in another class, perhaps basket weaving in the Old Testament. I'll never forget what that professor said. He laughed. And then he agreed. He said, Wallace, you don't belong in this class. He said, but you need to stay in it. You need to stay in it. You need to sit at the table and study the philosophy of religion with these students. Students who don't share your point of view. Students who don't share your faith. Students who don't share your theological positions. You need to sit at that table with them. And you know what? They need your voice at that table with them. They need the voice of a parish priest. He said, you don't belong, but I want you to stay. Staying and sitting at that table where I did not belong was one of the best decisions I ever made. So how do we cross those barriers? My final point, how do we cross those barriers? Paul says we cross these barriers by turning toward the cross. Notice what he says at the end of that passage. The message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to those of us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Yes, the Jewish Christians in Corinth had a belonging to Cephas, that is Peter. Yes, the Gentile Christians in Corinth had a belonging to Paul because he preached to the Gentiles. Yes, the philosophical Christians in Corinth had a belonging to Apollos. That's fine, Paul says. But what Paul wants the Corinthians to see is that the cross can hold them all together. The cross holds us together. One of my favorite theologians is a great theologian of the South, an Episcopalian, a Sewanee guy by the name of William Porcher de Bose. And de Bose, writing after the Civil War to a fractured country, understood what Paul was trying to say. Here's what de Bose said. He said, contraries do not necessarily contradict, and opposites need not always oppose. Hear that again, that's a mouthful. Contraries do not necessarily contradict, and opposites need not always oppose. What we want is not to surrender or abolish our differences, but to unite and compose them. De Bose went on to say, we need the truth from every variant opinion. The truth from every variant opinion, the light from every opposite point of view. We need the cross because the cross holds together contraries that seem to contradict. And the cross holds together opposites that seem to oppose. This weekend is a reminder that our country belongs to different groups. Some groups were celebrating on Friday at the inauguration, while other groups were marching on Saturday. And like Corinth, we live in a time where contraries and opposites are struggling to live together. That is why a place like the Cathedral of St. Philip is so important for our future. We believe in the power of the cross. Jesus says, and I, when I am lifted up on the cross, will draw all people to myself. Not just some, but all people. Our motto here is that we will be a house of prayer for all people. The Cathedral of St. Philip is composed of people from every variant opinion and every opposite point of view, to steal from de Bose. And to continue his logic, when you join the cathedral, we do not seek to surrender or abolish our differences. Instead, we seek to be a community of holy relationship, a community of where opposites and contraries can come together, can dwell together for a deeper understanding of God's truth. Let me conclude by reminding you the question that Pilate asked to Jesus. Remember the question? What is truth? Remember the answer? There wasn't one. Instead, Jesus is nailed to the cross. Truth is found on the cross, where contraries and where opposites are held together. The cross is what holds us together. Paul says the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to those who are being saved, it is the power of God. Amen.